My father was living in Japan for work, research, around the time I finished my last year of study. My parents' house in the US is in Chicago, where I grew up. I was living at home around that time, working a crappy job, and waiting to see if I would get into the grad program that I sought out. Anyway, I ended up getting my hours cut, and finally I was laid off. The work I was doing was for a research company based on the East Coast with a small office in my city, and they deemed it detrimental to keep the office open in that location. At this point I say fuck it, apply for visa, book a flight, and plan to visit my father while he is still over there. I got a pretty cheap deal on transfer in California. So I get there and have several hours to kill. There was a representative from a quick tour shuttle that was chatting up passengers. I talked to him about the tour, fees, etc., and they even offered to store your bags, so I saddled up and we went to downtown LA. The tour was exactly what the name implied. 20 minutes in the city and 25 plus minutes to and from the airport. When we returned, the guy I had been sitting adjacent to asked me if I had noticed the suited men at the back of the shuttle. I looked back and sure enough, 2 men in suits with shades, I know, very cliché, are staring back at me. I ask him what the deal with them is. He laughs and shakes his head. Then he smiles at me and says, "They were watching me. Now they're watching you too." Unsure of how to respond, I give up a laugh and look out the window. We stop in shuttle access, and he is the first one up, first to the door. 2 suited men are right behind him. I get off, and a furred guy I had not seen gets off behind me, / was waiting for me outside. He stops me and asks what the men next to me said. I ask him to take off his shades. Don't like people talking to me when I can't look them in the eye. Just irks me. He insists on this question. I answer honestly. The guy just told me about how much this looked like NYC. That's literally all he talked about. I go to get my bags. The guy is standing in the same spot and on the phone, still watching me. Skip past the extra waiting, boarding, seating, etc. 1/3 of the way through the trip, the guy I sat next to on the tour shuttle is making his way down the aisle from at least the next compartment. I say this because he looked much, much cleaner. His clothing was tailored, and as far as I could tell, custom. I try not to stare at him as he makes his way down when he stops next to me, placing his hand on my shoulder. He thanks me for helping out back there, mentions if I need any help when I get to Tokyo. This was a direct flight at that point, to give him a ring before handing me a card. I'm dumbfounded at this point, not really sure what to make of the situation. He pats me on the shoulder and goes back to whatever class seating he came from. Looked down at the card he gave me. It was just red, Japanese writing in the bottom right corner of a white card. Nothing else. Nothing else abnormal happened after this. I never actually saw the guy when I was getting off the plane. I did ask someone at an information booth if they could translate the card. She looked at me with a pretty concerned expression, asking me where I got it, etc. She said that the card had 2 pieces of information on it. One being a man's name, the second being the syndicate he belonged to. She refused to give me back the card at this point, and since she was behind a glass barrier, there wasn't really anything I could do about it. I talked to my father about it later, and he said the guy might have been involved with the Japanese mafia. I was/am pretty skeptical, because I find it hard to believe he would have something as incriminating as his own name and gang affiliation printed so finely on a business card. My father said he heard stories of Japanese mafia thugs being much more brazen, so he believed it. Anyway, like I said, nothing else abnormal happened after this. This isn't copy pasta. I just typed it up, and it was too big for the filter. Not exactly paranormal, but I was definitely noping the whole time that I was around those suited guys. I've lived in a pretty secluded area of Vermont all of my life. There is a giant opening big enough for a field and 3 houses, each with a sizable front yard and back. But other than that, there is woodland all around. It probably doesn't count too much because there is a road that runs quite close, but it is far enough away that you can't hear sirens when they go by. My house is in the middle of 2 hills with an open field right next to it, and dense woods around both the field and the house. The field gets fairly long, however, sometimes to the point where it is above your head. Adjacent to this field, separated by a dense tree line, and at the bottom of a hill, there is another field which rarely gets cut and in which grow some pine trees. Around that field, however, is a huge expanse of woods, approximately 40 miles, 240 degrees around. There is a creek running around it and a path leading through it. My story is from a good few years ago. When I was around 8 years old, my father still lived with me and my mother, and I used to take walks with him whenever weather permitted. We usually walked around the two fields, and we created and cleared paths whenever we could. We also dug some trenches for water to travel through so that the paths did not flood too heavily. One day, me and my father were doing just that, clearing paths and clearing out a trench we had created just 3 weeks prior of leaves and sticks that were clogging it up. It was getting rather dark, but we both had lanterns with us so we could still get some work done. Eventually, my father got tired and asked if I wanted to stop for the day. I, as a youngling back then, told him I could keep going for a little while more. He then told me that he was going to journey back and get some coffee and dinner and asked if I wanted to come. I rejected, as I could get more done if I stayed. This was not too uncommon for me, as I tended to wander off in my spare time. We had also taken our beagle with us, who tended to either wander around or stay near me, but who only barked if she saw something, which, in a sense, comforted me, because she would have been able to alert me if something was near. Even so, it was dark, and there tend to be bears and coyotes prowling around, so I tried to work quickly so I could finish what I wanted to do before I got too nervous. An hour or so passed by, and I was just about done as my dog started barking. Turning toward her to see where she was barking, I noticed she was turned toward the creek. As I looked to where she was barking, I saw nothing. This was fairly abnormal, as every time she barked, it was at something in plain enough sight that I would be able to see it, so I was a bit uneasy. When I finished what I was doing, I turned to walk home. Around this time, I heard a low snarl behind me. Too low to be a coyote or my dog, and too dog-like to be a bear. I, of course, checked my dog first and noticed her cowering away, but not making a noise. Looking to see what she was cowering from, I noticed a black mass, akin to a giant dog, think St. Bernard, but bigger, across the creek. Noping the fuck out of there, I left my lantern and tools behind and ran home as fast as I could, with my dog running beside me. As soon as I got home, I ran inside and attempted to find my parents. When I did, I launched myself near them and told them what happened. I don't think they believed me, as in the past, I tended to make up stories about how I battled raccoons and wolves, but they comforted me anyways. While I was in bed, I heard a rustling in the tree line right outside my house. It may have just been the wind, but I heard underbrush cracking, so I think something was moving around. The next day, my father asked me if I wanted to finish clearing the paths, as there was still a bit left to do that I couldn't have done myself. I was a bit hesitant, but I agreed, thinking I would be safe with him with me. I, however, did not want my dog to come with us. When he told me to get my tools, I told him I had left them down where I was. He was not very happy about that. Walking down, I was extremely alert, looking around as much as I could. There was no evidence that anything large was anywhere near the path, and the path itself was only big enough for a single file line, but I was still skeptical. When we reached the location where my tools were, we noticed quite quickly that my lantern was completely destroyed, something which my father was furious about, as it had cost at least $100. My tools were fine, however, so he was not as upset as he could have been. Working for the next few hours, we finished everything and more, leaving the next few months open to doing whatever, so long as there was no damage from heavy rainfall or snow. Before we headed back, nature called for my father, and he wandered out of sight. He must have gone a ways away, because it took him several minutes to go and come back, but when he did, he was running. Urging me to grab my tools and run, he did the same. Concerned as all hell, I asked him what was wrong. He did not answer me, and instead looked around anxiously. I did the same. As soon as we were packed up, we ran. We were a good 5 miles away from home, however, so we were running for a while. As we were running, I kept hearing things break behind us. Not like the occasional twig snap. I mean full-on terrifying, lost shit. When I looked to see what was doing it, I nearly froze in fear. What I saw was as large as the mass I saw the night before, and it may well have been. However, because it was lighter out, I could discern its details. It was almost completely black, with dark red patches covering it randomly. Its face was akin to a dog's, and the rest of it was like a bear, the paws especially. When it picked them up, they looked like knives. Its ears were long and stood up. I did not see its teeth. As we neared home, the sound of braking ceased, though we did not slow down by any means. When we got into the house, my father locked all of the doors and collapsed onto the couch from exhaustion. I did the same, but I recovered more quickly, being younger and a bit more fit. As I looked out the window, I did not see the creature, but I was still afraid of the woods, and was for the next few days. My father was too, eventually putting up a steel fence around the perimeter of the tree line and a gate at the entrance to the path, which he locked. My mother was not happy at all about this, but it gave me and my father some comfort, and so her opposition went away quickly. Over the next few weeks, my fear of the woods subsided. My father, however, was still afraid, and over the next few months, I kept hearing him talk about not having enough money to keep paying for the house and wanting us to move. I, however, believe he wanted to move because he was still afraid. Eventually, he left, and he and my mother got a divorce. He occasionally returned to the house to check the fence and the lock on the gate, but my mother quickly got tired of this and got a restraining order against him. I have not seen nor heard of the creature since the night we ran from it, but recently, I have started to hear the fence creak, so I am starting to feel fear of it again. Spectral encounter on Oregon Route 99. Route 99, south out of Portland, snakes down wine country, going through a few towns, hills, and forest. A few urban legends about haunted accident scenes, Indian burial grounds, the usual P&W fare. So, here one story about a haunted spot on 99, northeast of Newburgh, where a supposed family were all killed when they were hit and run in their minivan by a semi-trailer, so decided to research it. No accidents on 99 that I can find that match up with the story. Seems like a complete myth, but locals about Newburgh and Middleton that I know separately tell me somewhat similar stories, and agree on a fairly precise location. No idea why, but seeing this site fills me with both a feeling of spoopy, but also needing to see it, a drive to understand if there is something about the place fueling the story. So, a little stoned, and having shit to do at 2 a.m., I ride out there on my bike. I mean, 99 has a bike lane most of its run, so it is not as crazy as it seems to be out on it with a bike. Yet to spot, a typical divided highway setup. Also can see traffic signals and lighting about a mile down one way and a mile and a quarter down the other, as it is at a higher point on a bend in the road. Both lighted intersections are on traffic control, and you can see them give 99 a red light if they detect a car waiting to turn onto the highway and nothing coming on it for a bit. Going about on side of 99, headed south toward Newburgh for a bit. Checking over the side, with 4K white LED lumen headlamp on and various red blinker LEDs going on bike and my backpack. No cars passing, which is odd, because even though it is late, traffic between Portland and Salem is still fairly consistent at all hours. So, do not see shit. No signs of a previous accident on the guardrails, tree line, drainage ditch, etc. Just dark as shit, and seeing eye shine from the occasional deer as I look toward whatever sounds of moving I hear. Decide to check out the northbound side and go to the turnabout to cross the highway. About to cross the northbound lanes with full lighting equipment on and working. Can see nothing has gone through either of the nearby intersections. Suddenly hit with a sound and fury of a passing big rig. Horn blares, tires kick up dirt and pebbles, air desperate to to get out of its unaerodynamic way, blasting me like a cold wind. And even though we are near drought, with no measurable rainfall in recent weeks, the air has a chilly dampness to it, like it was suddenly winter. Then realize the asshole trucker had no lights. No headlights. No working trailer lights. Jack and shit. Feel furious about how he near fucking killed me. Almost amazed he can see anywhere he is going, as last I hear is the engine revving with a gear change. Get across lanes to northbound bike path, rattled by the close encounter with a truck, as I bike slowly down toward the intersection. See the light stay green for 99 the entire time, despite 2 cars waiting there to cross. Yet I am the only thing stirring on 99, and the traffic management sensors do not react to bikes, only motor vehicles. Suddenly feel very confused, then even more rattled. Where the fuck did that rig go? I never saw it cross through the lights of this intersection, and I did not see or hear it heading further down 99 the entire time I rode downhill to this intersection. Also no, it did not loop back around, as I did not hear it, and there is nowhere to have turned a rig like that around on the road here anyway. Not really scary or mystical or anything, but I have read other stories on here talking about this, and it's sort of an unspoken rule in certain parts of the army. Ask engineers, MPs, chemical guys, and they will probably know about this stuff. It's just something that happens sometimes. Be me, 19, stupid kid, enlisted after a few months of failing college courses because I realized I had no self-discipline. Joined up as MP, and went to basic in the fucking winter because I was a dumbass. We're out on our last FTX, way the fuck out in the woods for the longest week ever. It's -15 at night. We are all freezing to death. Life sucks, etc. RPG comes around to check on everyone periodically. We are all bored because the other platoons are too cold to attack us, and the drill sergeants are too cold to play fuck games. I'm sitting there with my battle buddy. We are on the most isolated corner of the perimeter, which only existed because we picked a bad spot to set up in. It's like 20 meters to the next guys on one side, and there is a little hill, so we can't even see the next people to the left of us. I go to sleep for a little. My buddy says he can stay awake by himself. Next thing I know, PG is kicking the shit out of my boot. There's like 10 people running off into the woods in my sector of fire. Apparently, someone went off to shit, did not have a battle buddy with them, and after they did not come back for like 30 minutes, the PG found out. At this point, the pretend exercise shit has been abandoned, and everyone is gearing up to go look for this guy. My buddy keeps insisting the guy did not go out past the perimeter here. We had a good view from our little foxhole, and he was awake the whole time. Eventually, the whole company is looking for this missing private. It's still cold as fuck, and I start to get hypothermic. DS yells at me and tells me and another couple guys to go back to the fire barrels at the TOC. We are sitting around, warming up, when suddenly a 5-ton pulls up. Engineer markings all over the 5-ton. Some guys get out. They look like real engineers, and not TRADOC or drill sergeants. Hey, we found this guy. They bring out the missing private. Apparently, he was found completely naked, covered in bites and cuts, 10 miles away on a bomb range. He just fucking wandered up to them and mumbled some shit and collapsed. They never found his uniform or any of his gear. Luckily, he left his rifle behind. Somehow, he is okay though. Frostbite is not severe, and the bites and cuts are superficial. I didn't get to see them myself. He went straight to the hospital, but they sent him back out to the field a day before the FTX ended. Talked to him later in the barracks. He explains that he was attacked by a deer on its back legs that was saying things to him in English, and he does not remember how he got that far away. Graduate OSUT. Go to my duty station. Never see him again. My story is sort of vague, since I didn't see much of it go down, but there is other greentext about this sort of thing happening at Fort Leonard Wood. It's about 3 hours drive from the nearest city/large town, and it's just fucking unexplored weird shit. The land nav courses feel spooky, like you are being watched. I will never go back out into the Missouri woods if I can help it. Long-time lurker. Gonna post some of the paranormal experiences from my childhood. Some setup. 2009-ish. Live in an old duplex with mom, her GF, Kim, and her GF's daughter, Talia. House was built in like 1947 or something. Friends with the neighbors. Single mom with 2 sons around my age. When we move in, there are small pouches of scented herbs hanging from all the windows. Mom tells me not to move them, but eventually take down the ones in my room anyway, because I did not like them. Find pennies in almost every corner of the house. Just 4 pennies, all heads up, and arranged in a square in every reachable corner of all the rooms. Again, Mom tells me not to touch them, but pretty quickly pick up the ones in my room, not understanding why they were there. Bothered my tism, I guess. House had a crazy overgrown backyard. It was tiny. Maybe only 30 by 15 feet, and had tons of colorful plants that were wildly untended. Non-adjoined neighbor had a huge wooden privacy fence that made the yard seem even smaller and let plants grow vertically along it. A steep spiral staircase in the middle of the second floor hallway led up to a split attic. One side had Mom's exercise equipment, while the other had some junk for us kids. Boxes of toys and old video games, stuff like that. Second floor was just bedrooms and a bathroom. Master bedroom looked down the hallway, where the first door on the left was Talia's room, then the door to my spiral staircase, then my room, and finally, the bathroom faced back at the master bedroom. Stories in next post. Alright, so starting chronologically. Mom and Kim are moving stuff in, getting things ready in their bedroom. Pets are over there, as this was going to be their first night staying in the house. Kim has a big fluffy white cat with black spots that was spending a lot of time in the room with them because he liked to just watch people when they did chores. Cat gets bored and begins exploring. They stop unpacking and take a break, sitting on the bed talking about where to put things. Both watch the cat meander down the hallway as cats do. He walks into my room and within a couple of seconds, he comes flying back out of the room, smacking hard into the wall and hauling ass down the hallway and downstairs. When I say flew, I mean flew. He did not just run quickly and lose his footing. Came out of the room at about waist height and slammed sideways into the wall, like someone had tossed him out of the room. Both skeeved out, but continue unpacking and end up staying in the house that night. Kim complains about the smell of onions all night when they wake up in the morning. Said the whole upstairs hallway smelled like a man after a full day of work. Next few days pass uneventfully, aside from the occasional creepy feeling. They move us kids in. Cue me fucking with the herb pouches and pennies. Now, Talia's room and mine were actually connected by an archway at the back of the rooms. At first, Talia and I were just sleeping on mattresses on the floor. We were pretty poor at the time. Mom and Kim wake up to the sound of someone walking with heavy footsteps through the house one night. They see me sleepwalk out of Talia's room, down the hallway, into my room, and then a few moments later, back out of Talia's room. They can't wake me up, and both are pretty small women, and I'm in the middle of male puberty, so they couldn't really stop me either. Had to wait in front of my mattress for me to walk by, and both just pushed me over into the bed. Had to do this a couple times before we put my dresser in front of the archway and hung a curtain for privacy. I had never been known to sleepwalk, and have not done it since. My experiences in the house. We had 2 dogs, a bulldog and a beagle. The beagle was my shadow, and I loved her more than anything. She goes to bed with me every night, usually sleeping at the foot of the bed. Wake up periodically to her growling at the corner of the room with her cackles raised. Still laying down in bed, but clearly agitated by something. Corner she's staring at is right behind the door if it were open, closest corner in the room to the attic staircase. Can't ever see anything in the corner. It's too dark, but I reach down and pat her to try and calm her down, and myself down. She looks back at me, eyes wide, licking her chops, and when she looks back at the corner, she kind of just glances around the room like she lost whatever she was looking at and settles back down. This is a weekly occurrence over our 2 years of living there. I would sometimes wake up from naps or in the middle of the night to the sound of my name being whispered really loudly, like a stage whisper. Didn't sound like my mom or anyone in the house. The voice was usually masculine, and the oldest guy in the building was only a couple of years older than me. Plus, My bed was against the outside wall, not the one we shared with the neighbors. One night, I'm up way past my bedtime, playing Pokemon on my DS. Pretty sure it was a school night too. I always played with the sound off, still do, but I was feeling goofy, so I took the volume slider on the side of the DS and cranked it back up and down a couple of times, so the music played for a second, stopped, played for a second, stopped, repeat. Did this once or twice, before realizing blasting Pokemon music was a surefire way to get busted for staying up late. Few moments go by. I'm battling a gym leader or something. Distinctly hear the music come in and out again. Did not touch the volume slider. Finger was actually on it, forcing it to remain off. Sounded as if someone had recorded the exact sound that came from my DS and played it back to me. Shut DS off and go to sleep hugging my dog. Always had a sinking feeling when climbing the steps to the attic. Would occasionally go up there to play a game or something with Talia, but had the most horrific feeling of being watched the entire time. Even being with someone else would not make the feeling go away. Talia and I build a small box fort that I am way too big for. She left something in the box fort and wants it back, but is too scared to go up there. I go up to grab it and find it inside a long tubular box. Feeling of dread the entire time I'm in the attic, from the moment I'm on the first step, only getting worse as I climb up and get to the attic proper. Try to reach into the box to grab her toy, and arms aren't long enough. Would have to destroy the fort otherwise, so I get on my stomach and crawl through the tube. The second I get inside, the feeling amps up to 11. Still to this day, have never felt this again. All the hair on my body stood on end, and my eyes started watering. Snatched the toy and ripped myself out of the box, splitting it open in the process. Swear I saw something duck out of my vision as I ran out of there. One night it's just Kim and I in the house, and we're watching TV in the living room when there's a loud banging coming from upstairs. She arms herself with a kitchen knife, and I grab a heavy candle holder before we go upstairs to investigate. As we climb the staircase, we hear another bang from above. We sweep the upstairs and find nothing before heading up to the attic. Nothing appears out of place, nothing fallen over or anything. Next day, ask adjoining neighbors if they were making any loud banging noises last night. They weren't even home when we heard the banging. That's about it from my experiences in the house. Kim claimed to have seen a woman in gardening clothes in the backyard from the upstairs bathroom and ran down to see who was in the yard, only for no one to be there. Also claimed to have had a hand come out of a cabinet and grab her leg while she was putting dishes away. It only let go when she screamed no at it. She said she would often smell onions, like a man's body odor. We spent one whole winter all just sleeping in the downstairs living room. We have a huge sectional couch, and they would blow up an air mattress right next to it, so it was like one giant bed. I thought it was just fun, like camping, but in the living room. It wasn't until much after my mom told me that both her and Kim were terrified of the house and just wanted us all together at night. She told me that the pennies and pouches were to ward off spirits. They actually had a local paranormal investigation team come out to the house and take some recordings. If I can find the website, I'll post a link, but they caught a video of what looks like just a pair of legs appearing in front of the upstairs bathroom and my room, and just walking down the hall towards the staircase leading downstairs. A psychic came out and said that there was a portal directly outside my room and the upstairs bathroom that allowed spirits to come in and out freely, so take that as you will. This is my first time posting. I have quite a few stories to share. These are events that I have experienced, or stories that my mom have told me which I feel are unexplained and could be considered paranormal. First, some introduction. Lived most of my life in a town in the southwest US, bordering Mexico. Both parents grew up in the opposite bordering town before marrying and coming over to the US. Earlier years growing up spent most of the time with mom. Dad was usually at work and only really saw him during early morning, or at night during weekdays. Mom is super into learning about mysticism, the esoteric, and other religions, despite being the most devout Catholic I know. Anyway, enough of that. Mom tells me different things about her past. Be me, preschool to elementary school age. Mom starts talking to me about her past, specifically childhood, once in a while. Tells me about how her and her half-sister, my aunt, lived with their mom, grandmother, and had a horrible childhood. Grandmother was a single mom, almost never home, comes back drunk all the time, beats them, house is never clean with bugs and mice everywhere. At one point, their mother leaves for several months to go live in a different state, leaving them alone at the apartment they lived in. Mom tells me about auras at some point, says that she could see them around people when she was very young, but could do it less and less as she got older, and not at all by the age of 10. Says it looked like a white glow for everyone, not more than a foot away from the silhouette. Only differences between people were that for some it was brighter, and for others it was darker, and that the light would behave differently sometimes, being a constant straight shine, wavy or vibrating. Later on in life, thought it might have something to do with people's souls or living energy. Says she doesn't understand why she could see, but her theory was that it might work as a shield to protect us from certain things. Says she thinks the suffering that she went through might have fractured something, which in turn allowed her to see auras. Fast forward several years. Be teenager. Mom likes to watch a famous religious personality on TV. Goes to one of their gathering/shows in the US. Comes back and tells me excitedly that she was able to see the light around that person. Fast forward a few years. Come back home late afternoon with mom from groceries. I'm talking to her about this thing I learned, or some kind of idea, can't really remember what, but I am really into it. After a few minutes she stares at me in a weird way. I notice, and ask her what's up. Says she can see that thing she refers to as an aura around me. It's hard to say, but is faint and quivering. I get a bit creeped out, which makes her laugh. I've never experienced what she described, but I have no reason to think she was lying to me, simply just telling me about her experience. Mom tells me her experience with what can be called ghosts or spirits. Mom says she has been able to see and somewhat communicate with spirits for a long time, but can't recall when it started. Tells me about a time when she went to stay at a convent for nuns, went for a few days, either a few years after or before I was born. Goes with a group of other women just to get away from daily life for a bit and pray. She says that people in that town had rumors or believed that the head nun was very powerful in terms of faith, to the point that she could levitate and that demons would try to come after her. One of the days she is staying there, everything is normal. She gets through her daily activities. Night comes, and she goes to sleep with the rest of the women visiting. Wakes in the middle of the night. Has to take a piss. Looks out through a window at courtyard. The place is almost pitch black, if not for the moonlight and a few lamps outside. Bathroom is on the other side of the courtyard. Barely sees someone in the dark, walking towards the bathroom. Figures it must be one of the other women. Decides to go, and walks across the courtyard into the bathroom, barely awake. Goes into the bathroom, takes a piss, starts leaving. Realizes as she's leaving the bathroom that no one else was in there. Gets spooked, doesn't give a fuck, and keeps on walking until she makes it back to her room and goes back to sleep. Doesn't see anything strange for the rest of the visit. Mom visited by her dead father in her dreams. Age 5. Grandfather passes away. Never really got to know him. Was never close with my mom since he did not raise her, and spent most of his days during her childhood drinking in the streets. Everyone who knew him says he was a very calm and kind individual. One time, he got into a car accident that fucked his leg up pretty bad. Couldn't really walk after that, and also later got cancer. After death, Mom says she started having dreams where he comes to visit her. She says it felt almost like he was present by her bed. One time, a bit after his death, she has a dream where he comes to tell her that an uncle of hers from her mom's side of the family is going to die. She then sees an image or scene of several women sitting in chairs in a row crying. Wakes up the next day worried. Several family members are getting together at her aunt's house a few days later. Her mom has 6 sisters and 2 brothers. 4 of her aunts have always lived in the same house, where they grew up, and is a family gathering spot to this day. She pays a visit, and later on starts telling everyone about her dream, and that she is worried. Her aunts are creeped the fuck out, and are losing it. Some saying she is just crazy, or that her dad would not do anything to her uncle, because they got along with each other. Everyone is on edge. They change the conversation. No one brings it up again. A couple weeks later, my mom's uncle gets sick all of a sudden and has to be hospitalized. He's there for several days, and doctor says he's not looking good. Mom pays the hospital a visit with her mom's family. Her mom and aunts get emotional and start crying. Goes in to try talk to the uncle, but he is not awake. Turns to start leaving the room, and at that moment, she sees the exact same thing from her dream. Her mom and aunts were the women sitting down crying in her dream. Keeps it to herself and leaves. Her uncle got better after, lived about another 15 years. Sorry for the wait, had to go to work and just got back home. A few days later is the last time Mom's dad visits in her dreams. He shows up and tries to talk to her like he always did. She lets him know she does not want him to keep coming to her anymore and asks him to leave. He seemed a bit saddened by this, but ended up leaving. He never visited her dreams after that. She thinks maybe he regretted not being there for her as a kid and wanted to make it up to her somehow. Another time, about 5 years ago, a different uncle dies and Mom sees him in a dream too. Mom's uncle dies of some sudden, random lung illness. He lived in Mexico, but worked for the US Embassy. Would go to DC for training as a driver for important people, learn how to do different kinds of maneuvers and other related things. Anyway, after his death, Mom has a dream where she sees him. In the dream, her uncle says he had been tired out by his wife and daughters. Mom tells him to go rest now. He leaves, and she wakes up the next day. Some people in the family, including my mom, knew about a family secret regarding that uncle of hers. He had a girlfriend when he was younger, and was going to have a son with her. Dated his wife, who at the time went full-on yandere, threatening to take her own life, and forced him to stay with her and marry her. He had 3 daughters and 1 son with his wife. The older generation in the family knew about his first son, but his wife did not want him in the picture. Once he became an adult, he would try to reconnect with his dad, and sometimes people in the family would try to help, but his wife and daughters would throw tantrums and make him feel like shit. Saddest part was when they did not even let his son go to his funeral. Okay, here's some more strange things my mom has told me before that have nagged me for some time, especially the last. Be me, about 5 to 8 years old. Mom tells me about how I am special. She has told me this multiple times throughout my life. Yeah, there's the typical, moms all think their kids are special, but when she tells me this, the way she says it is different, and clearly separating me from my brother. Tells me about how I was made and born. No, not the sex talk. Says that the reason I'm special is because before I was conceived, she met and spoke with God in her sleep and planned me out, my qualities, personality, etc. That's all she says, and it never goes anywhere else. Anyway, later I'm in elementary school, and she tells me about a different story I've heard about 4 times since. Be me age 5. Random day Mom is eating at a restaurant with some friends. Having conversation and starts talking to her friends about me. Mom notices some man walk up next to her table and calls out to her. Mom asks him if he needs anything. The man says he could not help but overhear the conversation. Specifically, the one about me. What the fuck? The man tells my mom that I am special and that he knows someone, another man, who would really like to meet me. Lets my mom know where to find them and leaves. Mom is a bit creeped out. Think they're probably random weirdos. She doesn't go look for them and forgets all about it. A few months later, Mom has a friend who is into divination. Her friend says she heard about a guy who happens to be in town at that time that does cowrie shell reading. Friend wants to go but not alone, so she invites Mom. Mom does not buy into that stuff, but decides she'll just go along with her friend, but won't get the reading done. They go to meet the dude at the place. He does the readings. Mom describes him as a gringo hippie from the way he looked and was dressed. Probably in his 50s. Friend gets her reading done, and Mom just watches. After they're done, the man asks my mom if she wants a reading. Mom tells him she doesn't, and they start getting ready to leave. The man out of nowhere straight up starts telling her these things that to this day she does not quite understand. He asks her, but more like stating, "You have a young boy about 5, right?" My mom is a bit confused, but doesn't think much of it and tells him that's right. As best as I can remember, The man then says, "Your son is very special. He is a being of fire and a very old soul that was a great teacher and has come to teach people. You must be careful in nurturing that fire and not let it go out." After that, he tells her to bring me to him when she gets the chance and that he really wants to meet me. Mom just says okay and leaves. She's really weirded out now, but also intrigued. She decided not to take me and just kept it to herself. Her reasoning for that was she thought it would be really weird to take her son to a random stranger. At the time, back in the early 2000s, my mom was really into that indigo and crystal child stuff, so she thought there might have been some kind of relation. She would think I was an indigo child. Don't really understand much about that myself, and she doesn't really seem into that stuff anymore.